And we are back. Court Justice, C.G. Cooper, written in red. Lucky you. Chapter 9. Vanderbilt University Hospital, Nashville, Tennessee. Cal Stokes stared at the ceiling. He had the urge to chuck pencils at it. A moment later, Brian entered, clutching a stack of papers in one hand and a cheap styrofoam cup in the other. At least it was hot. Forgot I'd stashed this back at the nurse's station. Phone messages. Cal grabbed the coffee and the inch-thick stack of messages. This many people called for me? Yeah, you must be famous or something, Brian chuckled. I put what sounded like family and friends on the top and left the reporters and weirdos on the bottom. Brian left the room and Cal looked down at the top message. It was from Jess's dad, Frank, earlier that morning. He thumbed through the rest and saw that Frank had called at least 3 times a day. Under those messages was a bunch from his dad's company, old friends checking to make sure he was okay. Sorry, guys, but you'll have to wait a little bit longer. He took a deep breath, picked up his cell phone, and dialed Jess's parents' number by memory. Frank picked up after the first ring. Cal? Hey, Frank. All his experience in technical maneuvers, and yet nothing prepared him for this moment. I know, son. Suddenly, Jess's old man was real. He wasn't just some piece of collateral damage to be figured into the equation after the fact. He saw the man's kind eyes in his head, remembered the plain-spoken way he had about him, the way he called him son. Cal could hear the muted crying on the other end, and that's when he lost it. Frank, I'm so sorry, so sorry. I tried. I'm sorry. Something had crawled inside the hole in his life and poked at its walls with a dagger. It began with a soft sob and a feeble attempt to suppress it. All decorum went out the window, and he broke, dropping the phone into his lap. The tears and the sobs continued for a few more minutes. This was grief. This was every loss magnified, replayed. This was the dagger poking, sticking, and twisting in his gut. He'd run this conversation over and over before it happened, but all his preparation was for nothing. The depth of his grief and despair lay open. He'd lost the love of his life, the one woman who'd understood him, the woman who could help him make sense of all the madness in the world. She'd filled in all the empty spaces. Now that beautiful woman was gone. He hated that the only picture he could remember her was the final moment in the blood-soaked alley. No one should die in a place like that, especially his wonderful Jess. I'm so sorry, Jess, he thought. To his surprise, Jess's father was still on the line when he picked it up. Son, are you okay? How can he ask me something like that right now? Shouldn't he be yelling and screaming at the man that got his daughter killed? Yeah, I'm okay, Frank. I just want to say I'm sorry. It wasn't your fault, son. You did your best. Jess wouldn't want you to blame yourself. Cal could barely keep his voice above a whisper. I know. When can we come see you? I'd really rather come see you guys, Cal said. When's Jess's funeral? We were waiting to hear from you. When are they releasing you? I'm not sure. I've got a couple other phone calls to make. Can I call you back when I know for sure, or when I know more? Sure, Frank paused for a beat. And Cal? Yeah. I love you, son. Unable to respond, the tear-soaked Marine hung up the call. He couldn't bring himself to turn his head and see the pictures of his beloved, captured in one of their happiest moments. He understood now why some cultures erase all physical traces of a deceased family member. We are finite vessels, after all, and some grief is just too much to bear. He realized that not even a lifetime in battle could prepare you for the death of a loved one. The pit of emptiness he felt in his stomach threatened to overwhelm him. He tried to push it away. Work, damn it. I have to work. He took a cleansing breath, followed it with a heavy swig of tepid hospital coffee, and turned to the stack of handwritten phone messages. The next calls were from his cousin, Travis Hayden, a former Navy SEAL who ran Cal's father's company. He speed-dialed Travis and waited for his cousin to answer. Cal? Cal took a deep breath before answering. Hey, Trav. Shit, man. Cal could hear the relief in his voice. What the hell is going on? Why didn't you return my calls? Me and some of the boys were about to raid the hospital. I've had a lot on my mind, Trav. Travis' voice grew softer. Yeah, I know. I can't tell you how sorry I am about Jess, cuz. Thanks. But I really don't want to talk about it. Okay? How about you? How are you feeling? It's never fun to be shot, but I'm doing okay. What are the doctors saying? They say I need some physical therapy and want me to stay here for a couple weeks. Is there anything you can do about that? Travis always seemed to know someone that could pull a few strings. I've already looked into it. How about we get you a ride in an ambulance back to the compound and have a doctor check on you a couple times a day? Cal thought about the 2,000-acre campus south of Nashville that housed Stokes Security International, SSI. It would be good to see it again. I'd love it, Cal said. I can even put up with a doctor if I can come home. You got it, Cal. Let me make some calls. You sit tight and I'll call you back within the hour. With that, the phone went dead and Cal put it back on the nightstand. The rest of the messages were from friends, employees within SSI. He'd waited until he got back to the compound before talking to them. True to his word, Travis called back within the hour. So I talked to the hospital staff, and they weren't too happy about the situation. But I explained that we have a doc to escort you back to the compound, and that he'll be on call 24/7. Relief flooded Cal's body. Cool, thanks for doing that. They only had one request. I guess they've got some male nurse taking care of you? Yeah, former corpsman. Good guy. Perfect. Can you get him on the phone? Yeah, hang on while I press the call button. 30 seconds later, Brian walked into the room. What's up, Marine? I need you to do me a favor. My cousin's on the phone and he's helping me get out of here. He needs to talk to you about some requests the hospital's made. Brian tilted his head in confusion, but nodded and grabbed the phone. This is Brian Ramirez. Cal watched as Brian nodded his head and grunted yes a couple times. Then he said, yeah, I can take some time off. Cal couldn't hear the conversation, but he had a feeling about what was coming. Okay, Brian said. I'll see you soon. Brian handed the phone back to Cal. You want to tell me what's going on, Trav? Cal asked. Brian will fill you in on the details. We're working to get the ball rolling and get you out of there today. Awesome. Thanks again. No worries. I'll see you soon, cuz. Cal replaced the phone on the nightstand and looked at Brian. What was that all about? Your cousin just hired me for a couple weeks. He what? I guess the hospital would only let you out of here if one of their staff went along with you, Brian explained. Since I've been your wet nurse, they figured I was a perfect fit. That way the hospital minimizes its legal exposure and you get good care. I've got some time off I can take anyway, and your cousin said he'd put me up in that compound place, pay me double what I make here. Any chicks in the compound? Cal laughed. Only one, and you don't want to mess with her. Okay, then let me get my things together and I'll pack up your stuff. Anything you need? Any way I can avoid you being my babysitter? Not if you want to get out of this hospital. Just suck it up, Marine, and let me get paid. Cal reclined again and turned his eye back up to the ceiling. It wouldn't be so bad having Brian around. Walking was still a chore. Having someone he knew pushing him around in a wheelchair might be okay. Plus, the compound was a big place, and he'd have way more to do there than he would sitting around in the hospital. Hell, SSI was technically his company after all. The future brimmed with possibilities. Chucking pencils at the ceiling wasn't one of them. So, not the most uplifting of chapters, but not too much to say. I think that was a pretty obvious thing. One thing that I've always tried to get across with Cal Stokes is that he doesn't like help. I'd say that's probably true for a lot of us Marines, a lot of us people in general. In general, he doesn't like to ask for help, and he doesn't like it when people come to his aid. It's a stubbornness in him. He's probably had it for his entire life, kind of like me. And maybe some of you guys are the same way. So I hope you guys understand that. And, of course, it was nothing against Brian that he didn't want Brian to come back to SSI with him. But having somebody babysit him is not exactly his cup of tea. So let's move on to Chapter 10. And don't forget, all the links are down below in the descriptions to where you can get my books, especially where you can buy Core Justice, the first book, to read along. Whether you download it on your Kindle or buy the paperback version. Thank you, and hold on for the next chapter.